Hello everyone, welcome to my channel Programming Forecast. So today we will begin our lesson number 4, and this lesson is one of the most important in Express because every request in your authentication system will pass through this lesson. So today we will learn about middlewares. So if you truly understand middleware, then JWT authentication, validation, logging, error handling, and authorization will all make much more sense. So let's not further delay, get into our tutorial. So by the end of this lesson, you will understand what middleware is, why Express uses middleware, how middleware works internally, what next method does, how express.json works. Oh, okay, so this is a middleware name, express.json. Then the complete middleware execution flow, and last but not the least, how production applications use middleware. So before we learn middleware, let's first ask an important question. When a client sends a request like post register, obviously this is a HTTP method to register to a application. So when a client sends this request, does Express immediately call it controller? Many beginners think the answer is yes, but the real answer is no. There are several steps before the controller executes. So here are the complete journey. Suppose through your Flutter app, client sends these requests. So the request actually travels like this. I hope you can see the flowchart. Okay. I hope now this is clear. So there are two flowcharts. In my left, let's understand this cycle first. So when the client hits a API from Flutter app or request for any information or send this request post register from Flutter app, then the request go to the internet and then it comes to our Node.js HTTP server, and then it will go to the middleware, and then after the middleware it will go to the matching route, and then through the route it will go to the controller, as you can see. So notice something very important. Middleware runs before the controller. Middleware runs before the controller. So that is why understanding middleware is essential. So now the question is, what is middleware? So a middleware is a simply JavaScript function that executes during the lifecycle of an HTTP request. So let me tell it again. Middleware is a simply JavaScript function, nothing else, just a JavaScript function that executes during the life cycle of an HTTP request. So what is HTTP request? If you can see this request, the post is the HTTP method here and register is our URL. So this is a HTTP request. So now the Express gives us middleware access to the three things. In middleware, we will get access to the three parameters: the request parameter, the response parameter, and the parameter called next. So these three parameters appear in almost every Express project. So think of a middleware like a airport security, suppose, and imagine you are on a boarding flight, and you don't go straight to the airplane, right? You pass through several checkpoints. Like as a passenger, you go to for checking the ticket, then the security check, then the verification of your passport, then you pass the boarding gate, and finally you get into the airplane. So Express is work the same way. So first client sends the request, then it goes to the logger middleware, then authentication middleware, then validation middleware, and then finally the controller through the routes. So each middleware checks or modifies the request before allowing it to the next middleware. So as I said, middleware is just a function. So let's create our first middleware. If you can see here, the name of our middleware is logger. And as I said, middleware is just a JavaScript function, nothing else. And we said before that we have access of request, response, and next method in our middleware. So we will get these 3 parameters in our every single middleware. So what we are doing here, nothing, just printing a message, request saved, and then we are going to the next. So this is a next method and it helps us to go to the next code. That's all middleware is. So now let's understand each parameter. So here REQ, this represents the incoming request. It contains information such as request method, request URL, request headers, request body, request parameters, which is params in short, and request query. So this is our request, and this email at Shahid Gmail is our request body. So now the response parameter. So RES represents the response that will eventually be sent back to the client. For example, we write response in JSON format like res.json, then there can be a message like registration is completed successfully. So once you send a response, the request lifecycle ends. Now the next method. So imagine this is the most misunderstood function in Express, by the way. Imagine 3 middleware functions there are. One is middleware A, then middleware B, and then finally the controller. So how does Express know it should move from A to B? How does Express will know that we should now move to the B after middleware A? So because we call this next method under our middleware A. So this next method tell us to go to the next middleware or to continue through our code. So without the next method, the request stops there and the controller never runs, because we never go to the controller without the next method. So the browser keeps waiting until it eventually times out. So now we will visualize the next method. Suppose we have logger middleware, and this is the way to use middleware in our Node.js app. So we will use this use method to use our middleware logger. So we have 3 middlewares here: logger, authentication, and validation. And then we have a HTTP method or a API, which is a post method for registration, and then a register controller. So the execution flow is the request go to the logger. Whenever the client hits the API, then this route, this is our route. So it will send us, sorry, this is not, first we will get the request, we will accept the request through app.listen, then it will go to the middleware logger. Then under the middleware logger we have a next method, so that our request can go to the next middleware authentication. Then we have another next method inside this authentication middleware. Then through this next method it will go to our next middleware validation. So after that it will go to the register controller. So this is the execution flow of middleware to controller. So every middleware decides whether to continue or not. So what if we don't call next? So if we don't call next, then the request will first go to logger and it will stops here. It will never go to the authentication, never go to the invalidation, and never to the controller. So no response, no controller, no response. Eventually the client receives a timeout error. Middleware can also end the request. Not every middleware calls the next method. Authentication can be a good example of it. So this is a function named auth. This is a middleware basically. So we have three parameters: request, next, and request, response, and next. So there is a if block. If in header we got the authorization, then we will go to the next method. If don't, then we are calling 401 and we are sending a message unauthorized. So the flow is, the request will go to the request is come to our authentication middleware, and it will check if the token exists, the authorization token, which normally we keep in our headers. So it will check for the token. If we got the token, then it will go to next, and if we don't got the token, then it will go to inside the if block. So it will get no token exists, so we will get 401 or unauthorized response. So middleware can either continue the request or stop the request. Now here comes our built-in middleware. So we have a built-in middleware in almost every Express application. You will see this middleware, express.json. So many developers use it without understanding it. Suppose Flutter sends a request post registered, and the body is like that. We have the email and password to register to our application. But without the express.json, you cannot get the body. As I said before, in our request object, we have body, header, and many more things. So if we want to get the information from the body, we need to use express.json middleware. It will parse the data for us. And if we don't use express.json and we try to console log the body from the request, we will get undefined. After using express.json, we will get a JSON object like that, because we get undefined because the request body is still raw data, and express.json reads the raw JSON and converts it into a JavaScript object for us. Now your controller can use this information for us. So where should middleware be registered? Usually inside our app.js folder. Inside our app.js folder, the middleware should register, and the order of the middleware is really important. So let me show you. As you can see, the authentication middleware executes before the body is parsed. Means before we are using the express.json, we are calling authentication middleware. So if your authentication middleware needs the information from request.body, it won't be available yet. So the better order is use express.json before, and after that use other middlewares, so that this middleware can use the information from the request. So Express executes middleware in the order they are registered. Now, types of middleware we will use in this course. As our authentication systems grows, we will add some middlewares. So there are the list. Express.json, which is to parse the JSON request. Logger, which is to record incoming requests from the client. CORS, which is to allow approved origins. Then Helmet, which is to add security headers. Then Cookie Parser, to read the cookies for us. Then Validation, to validate the request data. And then Authorization, to check user roles. Then Error Handler, to return consistent error responses to the client. And finally, JWT Authentication, that verifies access tokens. So every one of this is just another middleware function. So your homework is to create a simple middleware called logger that prints the HTTP method for us. Secondly, print the request URL, and finally calls the next method and then register it with app.use. Finally, send the request using Postman or your browser and observe the console output. So now I will help you by giving you some interview questions you may get in your interviews related middlewares. First one is, what is middleware in Express? Second, why does middleware receive request, response and next parameters? Thirdly, what happens if next method is never called? Fourth, can middleware send a response without reaching the controller? 5. Why is express.json needed? And finally, why does the order of middleware matters? So before the next lesson, I recommend you do not write authentication code yet. So we will spend time experimenting with some middleware. We will be creating 2 or 3 custom middleware functions, then changing their registration order above how execution changes, and we will try removing the next method and see what happens, and then try returning a response from middleware and confirm the controller no longer executes. So those experiments will make the behavior of Express much clearer than simply reading about it. So in the next lesson, we will build on this by configuring production middleware such as CORS, helmet, logging, cookie parser, and request security. So that's all for today. Hope we will meet at our next tutorial. Please subscribe to my channel and share it with your friends and family, whoever needed it. Thank you, everyone.